In 1794, Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Robert Southey set out to save the human race by establishing a small political community in which property was held in common and everyone had a vote. They wanted to create a utopia where wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking were nothing but a bad memory. The 27 hand-picked communitarians would rub along together comfortably, bound by a sort of sunny reasonableness. Coleridge and Southey, who were still undergraduates when they dreamed up the scheme, were typical of their time in believing that political change went hand in hand with revolutions of feeling. To have any hope of achieving one, you had to fix the other. Naturally, it all went wrong. The original idea had been to set up the community in post-revolutionary America, an appropriate place for radical new beginnings. But when that proved to be expensive, Coleridge was already deep in debt as a result of some distinctly unreasonable expenditure on wine and women. Someone suggested they scale the scheme back to a Welsh farm instead. Then there was the question of sex. In a community where property would be held in common, did that mean wives would be shared, too? Quite aside from the impropriety of the thing, it sounded so cold and calculating, as if sex were a passionless commodity rather than the effective glue that held two loving individuals together. Then Southey, who was always of a pragmatic turn of mind, suggested that perhaps the new community should include some servants. They would eat at the same table as everyone else, of course, but they would spend their days doing the hard labor while the full members of the community thought and wrote about the joys of social equality. Coleridge was appalled. If Southey wanted slaves, then the game was clearly over. In the end, no one ventured even as far as Wales, and the failure of pantisocracy, the odd neologism means equal government by all, remains one of the great set pieces of the 1790s. By retelling the story here, though, Rachel Hewitt is doing much more than going over old ground. In this remarkably ambitious book, she sets out to show how the last decade of the 18th century, an era usually perceived as consisting exclusively of revolt, repression and very bad temper, was actually the place where the modern psyche was made. Long before Sigmund Freud was expounding on civilization and its discontents, the Pantisocrats and their peers were wrestling with the problem of how to manage the friction between an individual's instinct for freedom and the state's insistence on doing what you're told. Pantisocracy failed to launch because of the difficulty of getting 27 people to agree on anything. Other utopian schemes got further because they had an element of brutal compulsion built in from the start. The wealthy inventor Richard Edgeworth, for instance, didn't give his eldest son any choice in his upbringing. Taking Rousseau's Emile as his guide, Edgeworth set about training young Dick up to be a noble savage, unencumbered by the usual rules about how to be a boy. The child was allowed to run wild in only the skimpiest of clothing and never experienced any check to his desires. This made him delightfully unaffected at the age of 10 and a total menace by the time he hit puberty. Used to getting his own way, Dick enticed the 12-year-old sister of a friend into marriage, and then killed the boyfriend in a duel when he dared to complain. He was promptly dispatched by his father to the U.S., that land of second chances and lost causes, and told never to return. Dream schemes. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Photograph Alamy women could come a cropper, too. The reformist writer Mary Wollstonecraft believed that men and women were perfectly capable of mixing and mingling freely without getting tripped up by their own desires. Unfortunately, it never worked for her. In 1792 she conceived a passion for the married artist Henry Fuseli and turned up at his house to announce that she would be moving in with him and his wife, in a sexless ménage à trois. Unsurprisingly, Mrs. Fuseli did not share Wollstonecraft's certainty that rationality and relationships could be made to fuse, and she slammed the door on her husband's stalker. The following year Wollstonecraft had still not managed to find a way to bring her emotional needs in line with her intellectual convictions. Stranded in Paris during the height of the Terror, itself a terrible case study in what could happen when theoretical utopias failed to take account of actual human nature, Wollstonecraft developed a crush on the American adventurer Gilbert Imlay, by whom she had a child. Returning to London, abandoned by Imlay and laid low by persecutory feelings of lack and loss, she tried to kill herself by jumping into the Thames. What makes Hewitt's treatment of this well-known story is the way she attempts to locate Wollstonecraft's breakdown in something more than personal neurosis. Using the work of Melanie Klein, she reads the profound sense of anguish felt by so many failed utopians as a kind of stalled mourning that resulted, in Wollstonecraft's case at least, in a transitory manic-depressive episode. The infamous gagging acts of 1795, which made it dangerous for radicals to meet or disseminate their ideas, were not, according to Hewitt, simply a way of controlling potentially dangerous bodies in space and time. By effectively depriving progressive citizens of a sense of community in which they could process their collective loss, the Act sought to isolate their emotional lives, too. This attempt to bring modern psychological authorities such as Klein, Donald Winnicott, John Bowlby and Eric Fromm to bear on the personal traumas of people who fumed, fretted and wept 200 years ago is a daring, even risky, thing to do. But Hewitt makes a persuasive case for her methodology, always careful to point out the places where things won't quite fit. The result is an exhilarating journey through the 1790s, a decade that tends to be pictured in the cartoon colors of Gilray or Rowlandson as a knockabout farce of addle-pated utopians and iron-fisted repressives. What Hewitt gives us instead are ordinary men and women, sometimes silly, sometimes cruel, but mostly just trying to bring their inner and outer lives into some sort of alignment. A Revolution of Feeling is published by Granta. To order a copy for £21.25 RRP £25, go to bookshop.theguardian.com or call 03303336 Free UK PP over £10, online orders only. Phone orders mint PP of £1.99.